Hey friend, welcome to Authentic Performance, the podcast. My name is Nat and I'm your host. At Authentic Performance, our mission is to provide education and advocacy for all athletes, developing awareness surrounding identity, purpose, and health, so athletes can live well beyond their sport. This week's guest is a familiar face on the podcast, one of my best friends and little brother, Ryan Osborne. Ryan is back, this time solo, so we talk more about his journey specifically with faith, football, and everything about being a college athlete. He's currently studying biology with an emphasis in pre-medicine and plays football at Harvard. I can't wait for you to hear this fun conversation, and I know Ryan's wisdom and maturity will be encouraging to you. Now let's get to it.
Action. Okay.
All right, Ryan, welcome back to the podcast. This is your second appearance. You don't have your better half with you, but
That's debatable.
I do think it'll be a good conversation about more of your stuff instead of you and Talisha combined. So, for those who didn't hear the last podcast episode, which if you have not, definitely go listen to that. But if someone hasn't, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, that'd be a shame if someone hasn't, but anyway. So my name is Ryan Osborne. I'm Natalie's younger brother. Many people get that confused and think I'm older, but I am younger by almost 2 years. So I went to Fall River High School, just like Natalie, grew up in a small town, lived in the same house as Natalie with the same family. So you probably heard a little bit about them before. But yeah, in high school, I was pretty much as involved as I could be, partly because Natalie was, and so then I just kind of did whatever she did. So that included sports, FFA, student council, the whole 9 yards. And then now I'm a sophomore at Harvard College in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I play football and study integrated biology on a pre-medicine track. So yeah, that's the rundown.
Pretty cool, dude. So let's talk about football a little bit more. So can you tell us kind of about your football journey from high school to now playing Division One, and just what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I saw in Natalie's notes that she labeled it as the recruiting process, which is interesting because there really wasn't any recruiting process for my situation. But yeah, it started playing football in high school. I was a quarterback because we had a really small school, so that's just kind of how it went. Um, and kind of the first challenge in my recruiting process was I didn't get to play any bit of my junior year because of COVID. And a lot of schools had like a shortened spring season, but our school didn't have the funding to have football and other spring sports, and so they just chose to do the spring sports. So that's how I started running track. That's kind of the offshoot. But anyway, so that made it very challenging to get recruited because your junior year is the most important. Because by the time your senior year rolls around, most programs kind of already have their recruiting class mostly full. And so fast forward to senior year, we had a good season as a team, went undefeated and won the state championship for our division, which was the first time in our school's history. And so that was cool. And I was kind of riding off that, hoping that would maybe generate a little exposure. And the journey with Harvard kind of started before any kind of football recruiting started, because coming into my senior year, I kind of knew that I was going to need to prepare for options to go to school if playing football summer didn't pan out. And so I had applied to Harvard just kind of on a whim, kind of thinking like, what the heck, that can't hurt. I already wrote the application for some other schools. And I applied early decision just because there's nothing, I don't know really why. It's like a lot of schools have an early decision that's restrictive where you can only do one, but Harvard's wasn't like that. You can just do it. So I was like, well, it doesn't hurt if I already have it done. And then I found out I got into the school like 2 weeks after football season ended. I was at a basketball tournament. So this was still like while I was getting my film finished up, like my highlight tape for my senior year. And that was kind of like, oh shoot, like this could be an option. And so I ended up emailing every single one of the coaches on Harvard staff, just like the same thing, like here's my film, here's like a resume and stats that I have. And like I got into your school. If you have a spot for me, it'd be great. And it was a little slow at first. Like I got some response from some saying like, oh, we're good. Like we don't need another quarterback, for example. Um, but then the head coach responded basically with like, oh, that'd be great. We want to talk to you more. Like we like what we see in your film, and think there might be a chance that be a fit on the team. And so that like process was kind of like lengthened out over the course of that spring. And I ended up taking a couple other visits to some smaller colleges in the Northwest. And I liked a couple options there, but at the end of the day, when I kind of figured out that I would have a chance to play at Harvard, I made that decision that I was going to go there. So yeah, that's kind of how it went to where I ended up to where I'm at today.
With kind of the difficulty of that time in recruitment for most people who were in that window of COVID and everything, um, probably had similar situations with the whole recruiting process. But um, was that really stressful for you? If so, like how did you kind of um, like enjoy the process while still making this really big decision for your future?
Yeah, I didn't really enjoy the process at all, to be honest. It was a lot of stress. And at the time, I didn't. I thought it was. I like kind of gave into self pity and thought it was like pretty unfair and just the uncertainty. It's like, and even though I had ended up with a great opportunity and I had other great opportunities too, um, just kind of the lack of knowing was really stressful. And even leading into getting onto campus my freshman year, it was still like really up in the air about how it would all work out. Coming in as a walk on, um, like getting a shot was basically what I was told, but like making the team wasn't a guarantee. Even with making the team, like nothing else came as a guarantee, right? So if you're a recruited athlete and the coaches have like something invested in you, usually you have a little more leeway with like the security you have, and so it's like I didn't feel any of that coming in. And yeah, it was just difficult. I was less mature in my faith at the time, and it was a trying time. And I didn't really appreciate kind of what God did to help me through it until after the fact, when I was like kind of settled in the football program, like, and knowing where I was at. Through the time, it was just kind of a lot of questioning, wondering like why, what's going to happen. And of course, I was excited about like the process, like going to a new school, seeing new places, like that was exciting. But it came with, yeah, just a lot of stress that I wasn't really equipped to handle at the time. But
Yeah.
I had strong foundation around me and people that really helped. So it wasn't ever like too serious. It was just something that I definitely I think would be able to handle a lot better now.
Yeah. What were some of the difficult components of the transition? So once you moved over there, I guess, I mean, obviously it was a little bit of a process even to be like on the team since you were walking on and everything and kind of trying out. But what were some of the things that were hard in that transition, or maybe even are still like you're still navigating since you're only in your second year and it's still a new environment, like socially, physically with football, emotionally, all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think the social aspects of being in a new location weren't as bad as I thought they would be. Like I think I kind of learned about myself that like I adjust to that pretty quickly. Like I still was able to meet people and like feel pretty secure where I was at. I didn't necessarily get super homesick and or just super stressed out about not being at home. Most of the challenges occurred just with like the transition of football. It's like when you're like the quarterback of the team in a small town, it's like everyone knows you and you like obviously I still had to work for what I got, but it was a lot different. Like you kind of had respect from people automatically. And I was able to like earn that at the time to school. And then when you go up to college, it all starts over. Right. And then especially coming in as a walk on and starting the season late, because that was another challenge is the roster was so full because of the fifth year seniors returning that I didn't even get to join the team until they were done with their like training camp period. Um, And so that was difficult because I was basically coming in as a guy that no one knew, just some like random guy, wasn't part of the recruiting class, having to kind of just get thrown in. Um, and the challenges that were just kind of everything you could imagine, like the playbook. Like I didn't have any period of learning the playbook. It was just like thrown into the fire, learn it as I can. Even like the schedule, it was like I just had to ask people, and then, like we didn't really have anything in place to like take me under the wing and figure it out. As like a lot of the freshman guys do during that training camp period. I was just kind of like just survive, and that's kind of what that first fall was. Um, and I grew a lot, and it helped me really lean on my faith, lean on my family. Um, but that was difficult just because of like the challenges that I think most like recruited athletes don't get. Like everyone has plenty, right? And that's why I'm saying like the social challenges weren't that big for me because I think just like the challenge of fitting into the program and trying to just find my footing kind of took over. And so that's why I didn't really find kind of the other aspects that probably a lot of people do to be that challenging.
Yeah, I'm curious just because I'm interested in, like, this is kind of an area of research that I've looked into a little bit of, like, this transition period. Um, like, I mean, obviously you had a bit of a different experience as um, like a walk on, but are there programs or education or any kind of anything that you know of or that you were in, later on that maybe eases that transition that might be kind of beneficial for other schools to adopt? I know, like, research wise, there's not a ton of information about like what things are working, what things aren't, and it's still fairly new. But did you have any like educational stuff, or at least hear from your teammates about things that were helping them to aid in that transition?
Yeah, definitely no like programs. I mean, like the closest thing that was helpful was like we had like a 6-day orientation program for freshmen. And so that was nice from like a school and social perspective, like being a student. I think that was successful, just like having kind of a period like where yeah, you have a lot of meetings and stuff you have to go to, but there's just a lot of like time to kind of acclimate before you just jump right into classes and everything. Um, from football standpoint, like there's nothing really like that. It's like if you come in during training camp, because I was able to go obviously this past year, I could see where that would be a lot better because it's like you kind of have more time without school. Is like the team, like we have like team barbecue, and there's different kind of activities where it's like you kind of just where it's not just football. Like you kind of have different things. There's like a mentoring program where they assign a senior to a freshman, but I didn't get that when I came in. So it's like I think they have like kind of the systems that probably are fairly successful. It's like I know from talking to some of my teammates that they weren't just like as lost as I was, coming in. But it's still a big challenge, because I think um, there's often somewhat of a disconnect between like the incoming freshmen and the rest of the program just naturally, especially with a program as big as football. Like you just don't have time to like meet everybody and get close to everybody. Like there's over 100 guys in the locker room, and when I know from being a sophomore, like when you already have kind of your close friends and people, like it's not the most natural thing just to like start reaching out and taking other people and getting to know them right away. And so I think that's kind of the hardest part specifically with football is like there's just so many new people that it makes it hard to like feel very connected as a team in that those initial couple months.
Gotcha. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about just the environment in football because I know, like, obviously, our dad coached football and like you played, um, and still play, but there's kind of this like known thing that's like people talk about occasionally of like the locker room, like it's sometimes not a very um I guess pleasant environment, or encouraging maybe is the word. So can you just like talk to us a little bit about what that's been like, whether in high school or at the college level, and how you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are definitely some like interesting implications with being involved with just that many people. And it's like college age football guys tend to be probably rowdier and a little crazier than the average person. So there's like I've experienced some of that. Like there's a little bit of like hazing and um like I wouldn't call it bullying, but like from the outside you probably see like bullying and getting on guys and stuff. But overall, I've had a positive experience within the locker room. Like I think like socially, it's kind of something that each individual has to juggle. But from a football perspective, I've experienced like there's I mean there's always competition, right, at every position. But for the most part, everybody wants everyone else to succeed. It's like and that's what I've noticed. It's like it is a team culture, and that's something that I've experienced way more than in high school. It's like my senior year we had 15 guys, and like obviously we were close and like we all knew each other, but it just isn't the same as like a whole group of people that all want the same thing. Because high school there's like some guys play just because it's cool. Some guys play to have something to do after school, right? Like when you're at the college level, everyone loves the game. Everyone is like dedicated and disciplined within themselves, and that's how they got there. And so there's kind of a collective understanding that we're all trying to do what's best for ourselves and the team. And I think that kind of like naturally helps to unify you from a football standpoint. um, and then yeah, like there's there's always kind of the juggling of the social side. Like I wasn't the most outspoken guy coming out of high school, like pretty quiet, thought of myself as a like leader by example. And I think that helped me in a lot of ways, right? Like I wasn't gonna ruffle any feathers. You just kind of keep your head down, respect others, and they'll respect you back eventually. It might take some time. I have to earn that. Um, but it'll come. Like that's what I've kind of found out going into my second year is that like and most of the worry from that, like most of the worry about fitting in was just from my own perspective. Kind of thinking about like how do these guys think of me? Like especially coming in as a walk on, I was always just like wondering like, oh dude, like do these guys respect me at all? Like, it's like cause like I might not have given them a reason to yet. But that was mostly all within my head. Like from a simple, like everyone is pretty genuine about like being interested in who you are, and kind of like what you can bring to the team. For the most part, everyone is very conducive to that.
Yeah, I know we talked more about like your faith and stuff in the last episode, but I do want to know just kind of how that fits into that environment too, where even just being an athlete, not just football, but it's not always the most popular thing to like share your faith and be outspoken in that sense. So I know you have like a group within the football team. So if you want to talk a little bit about that and just kind of what, maybe even what's like helped you kind of like stand up for your faith in a sense and like really stick to your values when not everyone else is always going to support that or really agree with it.
Yeah, that was like one of the probably the coolest realizations I had, like my freshman spring, was just how um, like rewarding of a community there was on the team, um, a Christian community. And it was interesting because like the first fall, I knew about the Bible study because guys would come around and say, "Hey, we got this going on," and kind of like with that social pressure I put on myself that like I talked about. I thought of it as it was always the day before the game, and I kind of like, well, like I don't want to be the guy that is not going to see the field, but I'm going to like go to pray and they call it Iron Man, and that's what the Bible study is called. And I was like, I just don't, I didn't feel like I earned it. Like I was like, I felt like I needed to be a guy before I would be showing up there, right? Because like no one really knew me yet. Um, couldn't have been more wrong, right? Like, and I kind of laughed about that with some of my buddies that are leading it now. But that's been really good for me. And something that's interesting, and I've like talked to some other people about it, and what I think is really unique, and this isn't true for all programs, but with football, is even though like obviously you're gonna have a varying level of guys that are devoted in their faith, some are not faithful at all, right? Like just like any program, but there's just a really high percentage of Christians within the sport of football, that you can see like across the board. I've just like been kind of noticing it more and more. Like within the NFL, like teams have a chaplain. There's like constantly prayers after the game, for the game, right? And it's not ever involving everybody, but it's like it always seems to be there. It always is a factor, and that's what I found is there's a lot of guys that like are just kind of looking for something, looking for some guidance, and there seems to always be people that are there to kind of lead that, and that's no different with our program. And I thought it was really cool because a lot of people, especially from our area up here, like didn't view Boston as like, oh, it's a very secular area with Harvard and MIT and that, but I have more Christian friends on my football team than I ever had in high school, and so that's something that's been really transforming is like we say a prayer before every game as a whole team led by our head coach. It's like I think that there's just a lot of that culture that could definitely be strengthened because some of it is very surface level, right? And it's not necessarily a lot of people that are very, very committed and deep in their relationship with Jesus, but it's there. And that's what I think is really cool. And what's kind of inspired me to try to take that a step further within our team is knowing that there's just kind of this natural aspect of the football culture that is like kind of open to like the gospel being spread within the team.
Yeah, and I think like the age range, obviously like with your team, it's a very common age for people to come into their faith and really decide for themselves what like their relationship with Jesus looks like. Because obviously, like you're away from home now, you're away from kind of the expectations and the norms of maybe your family or your community. So it's already a really unique population. And then I think you add in like the athletics part too of like people are searching for something that satisfies them, and they like, especially when you're an athlete, like a lot of times you rely on who you are as an athlete to be, what drives you. But especially as you like near the end of that, it's like, okay, well, who am I, like what's my purpose beyond this? And so I think it's cool to have obviously people that are there and encouraging it, especially because that is like the prime time and in a lot of ways the prime place for people to figure out what that means for them. Like in sports, like just again the identity piece is so huge, and then especially for young people, like in college, that's a very common time to really solidify like what your beliefs are.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's often tied together, like because I think everyone reaches a point where they realize that like athletics aren't going to last forever and there's something else. It's like I think the prime example was like our captain last year, Nate Leskovic, like was like a 3-year starter, right? Like did super well for the program. And he like started coming to Ironman during his junior season, where he had like, and it wasn't like I don't know directly. I haven't talked to Nate directly about it. This is just kind of just what I've noticed, but like, and he's been very open about just like wanting more purpose out of his relationship with Jesus, and it's like I see it as directly linked to like he realized he wasn't going to go to the NFL. He was like kind of starting his journey to the professional world and like what his career is going to look like. And I think that happens for a lot of people. It's like realizing that a lot of athletes naturally like can tend to use their sport as a bit of an idol and kind of hide behind that and not really identify who they are, right? And that's where like even though there's a culture of being Christian by name, right? Like living it out and understanding what that really means and what the gospel teaches and what how we're supposed to live it out. I think that transition really puts that question in people's minds, right? And so then when they have some kind of background and knowledge of the faith, and then they're kind of faced with that dilemma, I think that's a big opportunity for growth and like something I've seen with some of the older guys in the program and talking about, right? Because there's always going to be struggle, right? Like you're never going to be 100% satisfied within your sport, especially when you get to college. Like everyone comes from being a star player, you might not see the field at all, right? Or you can have a bad injury that puts you out for a certain time that's out of your control. Or like you might think that you can play it forever, and then like as you get towards the end, you realize like, oh, there is going to be an end to this, and that's when they look for something else. And so that's what I think is, like you said, like the age range, and I think especially in kind of the dawning years of your college career, is probably like the best time to reach people that are kind of just teetering on the fence of like, am I going to really devote my life to Jesus, or is this just kind of something that I kind of identify with?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about like kind of the academic side, and then just some extracurricular stuff and what that looks like now. Um, and I do think that this ties into that faith piece too, because like obviously a big part of your individual purpose is what your career or your occupation is going to be for the rest of your life. And you do often see athletes that are not maybe pursuing a difficult career in their college time because they have really busy schedules, and so they're just doing the easiest classes to get by. But obviously, that's not not the route that you're taking as a biology pre med major. But I do think that it's a cool thing to focus on too, of like what the academic side looks like, since that is the stepping stone to whatever your future career will be, which then you'll put most of your energy into that instead of your sport. But I want to start with just kind of the preparation that you had in high school, because obviously you've got a busy schedule, and we'll talk a little bit about that after. But how did those all those extracurricular activities that you talked about in the beginning? How did being involved in all of that stuff prepare you for what your day to day looks like now with, maybe not as many activities, but more, involvement in those different areas?
Yeah, I think like extracurricular involvement in high school is probably like the most important factor for like college academic success, I think. I would even value it over your difficulty of classes in high school. Um, and that might be a little biased because like coming from a small high school, like the right like the intensity of the workload we could take was limited. And that's like something like I took a couple APs, some honors, right? Like I took like the most difficult path I could from our high school, pretty much. Um, but it was right like in high school, it's still like you do probably most of your homework in class. Like you're like studying for me in high school was not really a thing, right? Like I just like maybe a little bit in class, and like when you had a couple of hard assignments or tests coming up, like maybe a little bit, but um the thing that prepared me most is just like being busy, right? Like having student council meeting after school, FFA meeting to plan as being part of the leadership, or having like speaking competitions through FFA like in the middle of your sports season. It's like those types of things prepared me more because like that to me that's what college is more like, right? Like you're not locked in the same building for like 7 hours straight, but you have like tasks throughout the day that you have to be at. And especially with having a sport, like there's just certain blocks of your day that are always taken up. It's like you just have to adapt. And so that I think was the biggest help going forward, is like yeah, it was. And like Fall River provided a really good education for like a small public high school has, right? But um I didn't find myself using as much of like the skills I learned from my school like courses in high school nearly as much as I learned like use the skills that I built from the extracurricular activities.
Yeah, it's those routines that are more important, because then also, like you said, you can kind of adapt that to what you're involved in now, but that's also gonna carry on beyond college and into your life. Like if you have a habit of procrastinating, like like you and I both know that. I mean, not to say that we never procrastinate or anything, but we learned in high school by like, okay, we have an FFA meeting at this time on this day. We have practice at this time. I can't procrastinate my homework until the end of the week. Like I have
Hmm.
to get this done because I have these other responsibilities, or even like preparing for different extracurricular activities. Like there was no room for that to you know occur, and so I think then that routine carries on, throughout college and life. Like in life, if you have a job, and you don't know how to use your time wisely, like it's gonna affect you poorly. But those specific like subjects you learn in school, like that's not, I don't think, even in college. I mean, obviously there's a bigger emphasis on like your course of study and everything, but even then I think it's all about how you can apply things. So how,
Mhm.
you're applying what you learn, but also like building those routines and those skills that are going to develop you as a person and a professional, and I mean an athlete or anything else you're involved in.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's important as well. Like you you want to think about it, right? Like generally speaking, your like working career as an adult is going to be your busiest time, right? And if you choose to have family with kids, and like your least busy time is when, excuse me, when you're a little kid, right? You have like nothing going on. And to me, like you want to basically like strategically stair step your schedule up to that point, right? Now that's why I think that it was an advantage having a busy high school, right? Because like you start getting involved, you go up a little bit, and then when you jump to high school, it's kind of a big step, but then it prepares you for college life, right? And that's why I think it's important too with even within college, right? I think a lot of students go and um, maybe like if you're just a student, right? Like you might just be taking classes, and if you don't want to get involved in anything else, that's fine. But it puts you at a disadvantage when you're going to adjust to the next step, in the workplace when you don't have that free time in between class, and you can't just do whatever you want on the weekends, right? Like you have real responsibilities, and so that's what I found to be rewarding too is like having that next step up, right? Like we had a really busy high school years, but now it's like I'm way busier than I was then. It's like because and you learn better methods, right? Like you learn how to first like fit in your studying with your sport. And then this year for me, it was like now I learned how to take in a couple extracurriculars that I can also add and not just be swamped. And so I think that's important to kind of have that like kind of stair step structure as far as your schedule goes.
Yeah. So with that, like what's your school schedule kind of look like now at Harvard? Obviously, like what is it? What's the acceptance rate at Harvard? Like obviously very prestigious, and everyone knows that Harvard is like a very academically rigorous school. Um, but then also you've got football. So what does your school schedule kind of look like, and how does football fall into that, and where does that leave gaps for anything else?
Yeah, it's challenging, especially in the fall, like during the season. I mean, I consider it to be like a blessing that football only falls during the fall. I mean, like we still have like a full off season with workouts and spring ball, but it's significantly less time. And so for me in the fall, it's very different from the 2 semesters. In the fall, it's like basically so we have like workouts right some mornings, but then pretty much like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. is like your open gap. Um, and the lucky thing about being a STEM major is that you have a crap ton of labs and sections that also need to fit in that time, right? So people kind of in a different course of study might not have that many issues fitting that in, but when you only have right that 6 hours a day and you're trying to get those classes like this past semester I had to change a class 3 times until I got one that fit within those hours because of practice. Like you take away the whole last part of the day every single day, and so that's what the schedule looks like basically. Is it's pretty much full between 9 a.m. 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, um, and a lot of those are like fitting in your 3 hour labs for physics or biology, right? Like, and that's something that's a lot different from high school. Is like um, those very like specific skills and areas of study that you're going into kind of carry these challenges, especially with the football schedule. And like while we're playing weekends, usually gone or either just busy playing a home game, right? And we start the practice schedule again on Sunday, and so it makes those like hours from like 7:30 to 8 after you finish practice and eat dinner till like 11, 12, right? Whenever like makes those hours very very important and essential to be productive and kind of get those assignments done. And that's kind of what I figured out this early. It was like you said, it's like you just can't afford it, right? Like it's like of course you're going to be dead tired and want to just relax or fall asleep, but you just can't really even let it be a possibility because those hours are so important. It's like and with a full schedule. from morning to afternoon, you don't really get many of those hours during the day to accomplish those things. And then in the spring, it's a lot different. We do everything in the morning, and so we start at 6 a.m., go to like 8:30, 4 days a week. So we have weekends off, and we have kind of that mini weekend and Wednesday. That's very nice, and then all the afternoons, right? And so definite change to the sleep schedule. So it's like trying not to go to bed past 11, 12, so you can make sure and get up. And then napping too is, is becomes almost daily part of the routine a lot of times, just because sometimes one thing I realized, right, is the general student population does not go to bed early, and so whenever you're involved in anything that has to do with a group, you're usually dragged into those later hours, and so that's kind of something you have to adjust to. But yeah, it is a lot easier in the spring, and that's why like I usually try to think about that when choosing classes and kind of what I can handle.
Yeah. So, what are some, I guess, practices or routines specifically for like time management, especially with like your schoolwork, that becomes really important when you are in the busier time, and even when you're not as busy, just having probably time to relax a little bit more and maybe be involved in some other activities. So, like, what practices are you using to kind of help out there?
The biggest like practice I'd say that I gained from the jump to high school to college was like organization. I don't carry like a planner on paper, but I do everything on my phone. But it like, and I was like, I did nothing in high school. Like I just whatever what I remembered. Luckily, generally it worked out, right? Like I didn't just forget to do things, but um, like tried a couple times, just didn't like it, didn't stick. Absolutely important for college. And I do it in the form of like all my classes, practices, activities would go onto like Google Calendar, and all the homework assignments and other things I need to do just go on a notes. That's like my to do list. And like when I do them, I check it off. I have all my due dates on there, so it's like I know how long I have. Um, and I wouldn't not be able to function anymore without that, because it's like you get lost. It's like there's when you have four classes each with like assignments coming at you all the time. Most of the time, like you kind of know, and like classes have a certain schedule about when things are due, but when you're in the rush of, especially during the season, it's like you you might have an assignment that's due right in the middle of your 6 hour long bus ride down to New Jersey or something. So it's like you have to have that kind of level of organization. And then the other thing that I've really found more this year is like find someone to do homework with, and that's like what I've told everyone I can about the college life is right. High school, most of us do things individually. That's just how it goes. Part one because it's easier too, and like you have different schedules. But once you kind of get into an area of study and kind of start seeing people and make friends within your concentration, um, it's like such a time saver, right? Because like at least at Harvard, I know it's like homework assignments are almost always graded pretty harshly for correctness, and can like really screw your grade if you just get it done, right? And like that's what homework was most of the time in high school, was like completing it. And it becomes almost like just mini assessments each and every week when it's graded like that. And so it saves a lot of time not having to try to go to office hours every time, and having a buddy that you can check your work with and work with on that.
Yeah, I would guess that accountability is good in that area as well, and just kind of having someone to um, keep up with a little bit, because it can be kind of hard. I mean, I have definitely been a procrastinator, like a it's like a natural tendency of mine, but and I think a lot of people struggle with that as well. But once you have some of those things in place, it can be a lot easier to you know go against that natural urge to just leave everything to the last minute and not do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to convince yourself that you don't need to do it at a certain time versus text a person that you already agreed on to meet at that time that you're not going to do it, right? So
Yeah.
even having those, like for me, it was like after practice, it was just like usually one of my friends, Mustafa, we were in the same classes. It's like it'd be like 8 o'clock, and that's when we meet every day. It's like, and work on something, right? It's like you always have something. It's there's
Hmm.
never right. Like you have to pick and choose because you can't just work yourself to death and not have time to rest. But um, you always have something, and so the more you can have a routine of having someone that can keep you accountable, and you keep showing up day in and day out, right? Sometimes you might not be feeling it, but if you show up and you have someone that can kind of drag you through it if you need it, it definitely helps.
Yeah. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about injury, because you've also experienced some injury. Yeah, our family, man, just has something with backs and back injuries, apparently. But you've also had other injuries throughout your time in athletics. So can you just tell us a little, like, brief about like what that what injuries you kind of had, or some of the recovery processes that maybe that entailed, and what was maybe difficult or not difficult about that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty blessed so far in college. Like I just at the end of the last season tore my labrum in my shoulder, but it's looking to be something I can play through. Um, and that's kind of the only thing I've had. Like other than right with football, you kind of tend to collect a certain amount of small injuries that aren't that serious. But and then high school, obviously, like the back thing you're mentioning was a fractured vertebrae my freshman year. Um, that was a long recovery with um, like just a lot of fear, a lot of not knowing really a lot of it was like I couldn't do anything. It was just rest. So that was kind of the hardest part, especially being a young high schooler that doesn't have a lot of maturity with how to handle that stuff. That was difficult. Um, but like really helped me out when approaching future challenges. And then I guess like the only other kind of serious injury I had, it wasn't too bad, but I my senior year playing had a pretty serious bone bruise in my thigh during the state playoffs that I had to play through, and that wasn't something that needed like surgery or an incredibly long recovery, but it was like in the middle of the season I couldn't really afford to rest, and so that was like as you probably remembered like a stressful week of not like not being able to walk one day and trying to just loosen up the as much as I could so I could run on the weekend. And so, but yeah, it's I mean it's a part of it. It's like I think like the back injuries right is not necessarily super common. Although I have like three teammates that have had similar things. In their childhood too. So it's kind of I think it's all about kind of how you deal with it because if you play a sport for long enough, you're gonna have something generally, right? Like there's some people that probably get through it unscathed, but you're gonna have some kind of injury to deal with, and so and a lot of it, right? Like some of it you can control. You can control your preparation, your stretching. I think probably everybody could be better at that. But there's a huge portion that's just out of your hands too. And I think kind of coming to terms with that, rely on your faith to know that God has a plan that's better than yours, even if it seems to suck at the moment. Um, that's a big part of it because like freak injuries happen everywhere, and there's nothing you can do to stop them.
Yeah, I remember thinking, like, when you hurt your back too, like, I didn't really understand how hard it was, and then like when I experienced, I mean, obviously not the same injury, but um something similar that is like a more long-term thing. Um i i think I had a little bit more perspective of like what that would have been like for you. So like, can you just tell us a little bit about maybe the mental side of recovering from an injury? I mean, obviously, physically, if you're going through physical therapy or any kind of extensive treatment, like there's that aspect, but also just like mentally not being able to do what you want to do. I mean, for some, it's like daily activities are impaired, and maybe it's just more the sport involvement. But what was that process kind of like for you?
Yeah, I think it just kind of goes back to the same theme, right? As like if when a large portion of your identity is within your sport, and that's taken away, it's like that's pretty jarring. And I think like the challenging part is, especially in those high school years, and injury is always tough, right? But if you don't have the aspirations to play after high school, right, it's kind of like, yeah, you're missing out on time, but there's not any kind of further implications. Where I know like when I got hurt my freshman year, um, like I missed part of basketball season and the full baseball season. Um, but like that's wasn't the main issue, right? Like the main issue was like the fear of like I'm missing out on time to get better. I don't know when I will be healed. Um, I don't like, like I could be using this time and rather than working backwards, in my head, like there's nothing I can do. And for me, it was like 7 months of no physical activity, right? And it's like, and usually that's would be a very important 7 months for preparing my body and skills for the next seasons, And so that was more the fear, and and it still is like right now, like with my shoulder, it's less about like the physical pain or the like even directly like the like missing practice, right? Like I wouldn't necessarily just be like super upset if I had to take a practice off, but the fact of taking a practice off means like that's an opportunity for other people to pass me, right? And or an opportunity for me not to get noticed to where that can lead to more playing time in the future, right? So it's like it's all kind of about what you're missing, at least from my perspective, due to that. And I think that's kind of something I'm working through even now is like trying to realize that it's important to kind of relinquish that control to God. And, it's like everyone deals with it. Right. Like there's one of my teammates at my position towards MCL last season, and he would have been playing a lot and then ended up missing half the season and then being out of the rotation when he came back. And it was just, very frustrating for him. And it's like you can't view it as like, oh, that's not fair or that's not how it should be, because it's just and that's what it's important to think about, to view just past your own sport, right? Like where it's hard to view an injury as anything but like awful when you're just looking at what it does for your sport, right? Because it almost never helps, right? Like there's some people come back stronger if they like through rehab and stuff, and like that's great. Um, More times than not, right? You're missing out on valuable practice time, training time. Like you would have been better off if you didn't get injured, right? But um, God's vision doesn't stop at your sport, and so I think like you have to kind of look past that too, and try to appreciate what you're learning in the process and how you're growing, because ultimately, right? Like if you can have the maturity to look back afterwards, you're going to realize what that injury actually did for you in a positive way. It's like now I can see that directly with my back injury freshman year. It's like kind of maturity I gained, and really what that helped me with was like a love for school that probably drove me um, to be where I'm at today with academics. Is when sports was taken away, I needed something else to kind of really be into and really competitive. And that's like when I realized like, oh, like I do like school. Like I do like learning. I do like doing well and seeking out knowledge, And so that's kind of what that gave me. And I think if everyone gives it time, right, it's hard to do in the moment, but you'll be able to see kind of the hidden positive aspects of injuries.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, with all that being said, like how have these experiences that you've had with injury impacted your future career and kind of the direction you're going now?
Yeah, very directly related. My plan right now is to graduate and go to medical school, and go into orthopedics, um, and surgery, hopefully. Um, and that came from just like a general interest from the back injury. Like first, I was kind of interested in like physical therapy. When I was involved in that, it was like, oh, this is cool. Like this is pretty like similar to like sports. Like you have something that you need to do and you do it, and it's like a very direct line to helping people and seeking out treatment to get them better. Then after I went to college, I kind of realized like, oh, like not a dig to physical therapy at all, because like we need physical therapists. But then I was like maybe I can go like I might want to go even a little bit further, right? And like go into the medical school side and learn how to fix. So that's kind of what the biggest driving factor is like I think it takes someone who needed fixing to appreciate like the ability to fix, right? And that's kind of where like my faith journey ties into my career is like right, Jesus is the ultimate fixer, and so it's like that's what God lives for within the people on earth, right? Like He wants to fix all of us, and we all need fixing, and so it's like it's very um, related in my eyes to like there's a lot of people that need fixing, and it's like I want to be a doctor that can do it, that can fix in some small way, right? And so that's kind of how it's related. And then, like I said, kind of the same thing with being injured and kind of having to rely on school as a source of like my I guess like competitive fire for that time. It never really left me after that, right? Like I regained the ability to be really competitive and love that in the sports I competed in, but the academic side like stuck around from kind of that period, and that's like super important for especially I like for what I'm going into. It's like ultra competitive, right? Like I'm in the middle of trying to prepare myself to look good to as an applicant for medical schools, right? And yeah, that part never leaves. So I think that was very important to that decision and the process right now.
Yeah, and I think that competitive nature is really common in a lot of people who are athletes, especially at like higher levels, like that need to have a goal or, try to be better than you were the day before. Like that's a
Mm-hmm.
very common thing. And I think if you don't have a healthy outlet, it can become really detrimental to you, when
Mm-hmm.
you're no longer in the sport, which is typically like a very positive thing, like character building, like there's a lot of really positive things with sports, and it's usually a pretty healthy outlet. But if you don't have that, like it can be kind of hard to navigate that nature. Like, I mean, so many of us are like that. I know, like I'm very similar. Like even last year, like wanting to run like a 10K with mom, like there's a lot to be said about like having a goal and getting those action steps to like get to that point. And so it's clear that like just the medical school process, not even anything beyond that, just that in itself is like kind of an outlet for that competitive nature that like you obviously have from being involved in sports for so long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like right now. It definitely feels like an overload of that competitive, right? Like still being involved in the sport and looking at all that is definitely a lot. I'm in a bit of a challenge right now, but like I can already see where my mind is going with that. Um, obviously, like I love football, but I'll play it for 2 more years, and that's it. I know that, and so it's like I can already see the shift of like. But now, even while I'm studying, like for the MCAT, or even just in any of my science courses, it's like, well, there's so much to learn. Like, I can improve, right, as like a scientist, as a future doctor, so much, right? And that's like, whereas like as an athlete, like, yeah, I can improve, of course, but it's like there's a cap, and the cap is coming very soon, right? So like, and then so it's like it's I think like you said, it's necessary, and something that has been kind of a natural transition for me is like I see where that thing that kind of piques my interest and sparks that competitive nature is already kind of like transforming, and like I think, like you said, a lot of people need that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Ryan, this is the last question, and you already got to answer this, but I'm gonna give you another go at it. I'm sure you have other things that you can add, and even if it's just a reiteration, I think it's still super valuable to hear your perspective. So, what does it look like for you to live authentically?
Oh, I didn't think this question was going to be in here. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, it was. Yeah, like it's changed a little bit. I don't remember what I said last year, but um, basically, like the way I looked at it, and I know like it doesn't have to mean with faith, but I know who you are, so I know that's what you're trying to get out of people. And so for me, it's like it is linked directly with like more boldness, and not boldness in an abrasive or negative way, but just like to truly live authentically. People need to know who you really are, right? And so it's like I think for me, on a personal level, it's more closely associating Jesus with who I am, and like making sure everyone knows that. And like I said, it's like I'm not the type of person that just is like, hey, nice to meet you. Have you ever heard of Jesus Christ? Like that's not who I naturally am. Nothing wrong with that's who we are. Like that's great. Like we need people like that. Um, but it's like learning how to incorporate that more into my like the true fabric of who I am, right? And like and knowing that like it's not really living authentically if I'm not kind of putting that out as who I am each and every day, And so that's like the challenge, right? And I think everyone kind of has their own challenge as they seek to live authentically. But for me, it's definitely boldness, understanding kind of like the real point of why we're here on this earth, like what's important, what's not so important, and just kind of how we can use um, where God's put us and the opportunities He gives us to really spread His word um, and try, like, more than anything too. I think is kind of what people miss some of the times, right? Christians is like, it's one thing, right, to identify and speak the truth and share the truth with people, um, but it has to like coexist with the way you live your life and the example you set and the way you treat other people, right? Because like speaking might, like, gain some people's interest, and probably if they're already interested and just like kind of need a little push, like that will work, yes. But like just speaking the truth and shouting out or whatever means you have of communicating, right, is rarely going to be the only thing that draws people closer, and it needs to be in cohabitation with an authentic life that like where people just know that you're different from one, like you kind of don't fit in with the culture, you aren't just like everyone else, right? Like there's something different about you, and the differences all need to be like core characteristics of who Jesus was and what He lived for, right? Like the kindness, the compassion, the charity, the confidence, right? Like that we have, and the faithfulness, the joy. So I think like all those things are things that I'm trying to work on, is like how to first of all, like gain those characteristics, and also let others know why I am this way, right? Like why I believe this, and who I am because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Awesome. Well, thank you for doing this again. I mean,
I
you've got
know I should get
obviously
paid at this point.
you, you've got a lot of wisdom, and I really do look up to you in a lot of ways, and so I'm grateful to get to share you and who you are with, the people that are, tuning into what I'm doing in my life. So I appreciate you, and I love you, and you're awesome.
The only reason she looks up to me, everybody, is because I'm taller.
That's
Just
not
just so
true.
that's out there.
No,
It's
seriously.
literally essential. But
Yeah. Well,
well,
anyways, thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah, peace out, folks.
Thank you so much for listening to Authentic Performance, the podcast. We would love to hear what you found valuable in this episode, so send us a DM on Instagram at Authentic Performance, or leave us a review on whatever platform you enjoy most. We want to thank you for your continued support of this project. It truly means the world. We also want to invite you to be a part of the Authentic Performance fam, so follow us on socials and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. For more information about how to get involved or to see how we're supporting athletes, go to theauthenticperformance.com. Finally, let us know what you want to hear on the podcast and who you want to hear from. We want to give you the best possible resources and support, and your feedback helps us do that. In the meantime, think about how you can live authentically. See you next time.